we're going to be looking at some of the exciting different solutions that we have to resolving plastic pollution. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit more from each of you in terms of what it is that your businesses do. So, Tuomas, do you mind starting?
Well, I can start. So, regards from the World Capital of Paper Engineers, Finland. So, what Paptic is doing is that we are replacing plastics with the next generation of paper.
Okay.
Because we've seen that the world has seen a lot of bioplastics, but if you look at it globally, 59% of paper has been recycled in the world, but only 9% of plastics have been recycled. So why not try to push the consumption from plastics to better papers? And that's exactly what we are doing. We are creating a next generation of paper to start replacing plastics in the areas where it's been today been used, with better products coming from the forest origin, being recyclable, reusable, higher in performance.
So I think you've got some examples here, because you were telling me about a laptop bag earlier.
Yeah,
And
so this is my own laptop bag that I've used now since the end of July. So it's already a bit worn out, but I've used it tens of times, and probably next week I'll put it to the paper recycling as the end-of-life option. So basically what we've developed is a better paper from the systemic approach, extending the life cycle of paper products, but still being recyclable, 100% compatible with the existing paper recycling streams.
Oh, fantastic. Helen, can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do at DoEat? I mean, edible
packaging.
plastic, packaging for
yes.
food. Okay,
Yes.
tell me more about this.
So, hello everyone, I'm Hélène Hoyois from Belgium, and I'm the co-founder of DoEat's company. So, at DoEat we have created edible and hyper-compostable packaging for food. That's what.
So basically, you put the food in the package and you eat the whole thing in one go?
Yes, you can eat, or because it's big, and if you don't eat it, you can compost it. It's made of potato starch and of waste of beer production.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, cool. So that transforms the catering industry.
Yeah.
You guys are like, this is different, right? I told you it was exciting, different solutions. So Terracycle, Laure, can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing? I think you've got some slides as well to show us.
Yes. So Terracycle is a company whose mission is to eliminate the idea of waste. So quite a big mission.
Bold.
But we're trying very hard. So we actually do that in 3 ways. So the first way is to look at making everything recyclable. And there, Terracycle will focus on waste streams and packaging that are considered non-recyclable. So that means that today they go mainly to incineration or landfill, although technically they can be recycled. But it's about finding new business model to collect and recycling. So that's the first really way. We help our clients and partners finding new recycling solutions for everything from fruit pouches to biscuit wrapper to coffee pods and so on. It's actually 2/3 of the waste we put in the bin today as citizens. The second way is that, and I think that's the next slide, is that we look at how can we help our partners to make products and packaging that are made from waste in the first place. And there, once again, we look at very specific plastic. We call them plastic with a story, with a strong narrative, because our goal is also to engage consumers, to engage citizens in this type of initiative. So a very good example is work we do with marine plastic and beach plastic, where we work with some partners to create products made from marine plastics. And the third way and the final way is really to look at new consumption models, new business model. We don't think recycling is the solution to everything. So it's also about innovating in other areas like reuse. And actually Terracycle is launching next year a big platform where we'll enable us, every consumer, every citizen, to access products that are reusable hundreds of times. So a new style of deposit scheme.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I've got a big question, and it might be a little bit, let's say, a little bit naive of me in some respects, because I look at this sort of problem and I think, well, this is great. It's fantastic to see the sorts of solutions that your organizations are putting out there to help us to reduce plastic pollution. but how big can we take this? I mean, is this a bit fatty, or is this something that we can possibly conceive can be a really big sort of thing? How big do we reckon we can make these products and solutions out there so that it's not just in Europe, but we can affect everything globally? Who would like to start?
I can start. So yeah, I think we can make this solution scalable and mainstream. I think there is not just one solution, and I think we'll see today a lot of innovators, people bringing solution at different stage of the supply chain as well, eco-conception, recycling solution, other consumption business models. In the example of Terracycle, when we started about 20 years ago, we were a very small business where companies were just starting to look at the challenge of recycling plastic. Nowadays, we operate in 21 markets around the world, 12 in Europe, and we engage millions of consumers just in a country like France in collection and recycling of how to recycle material. I think there is also in the past 2 years, there's been a huge awareness around the issue who help businesses like us, and we were just discussing earlier how it's been amazing to see countries, especially in Europe, leading the topic and really helping us scaling up these solutions.
Fantastic. Thomas, what do you think it would take? Do you think these solutions, can we really replace plastic with paper? Is that a scalable way forward?
Well, paper is already a massive thing, but the Paptic concept is that we think paper has a major design fault when it comes to the terms of using paper for flexible packaging. Because paper is also known by everyone that it's recyclable, it's renewable, but it's also brittle, it tears easily and it's water sensitive, and actually it's actually a very heavy material. When you compare plastic and paper in similar applications, paper is often like twice as heavy as the plastic. So what we are doing is that we are redesigning paper, not according to the traditional terms, redesigning paper to be more textile and plastic-like for the mechanical performance. And how are we doing that? We are actually reinventing how paper is made. So it's a unique process that we are commercializing. So we have a big, bold vision. So we believe that we are not only creating a niche product, we are trying to create a product with more than 1 million ton volume globally, so a billion euro business. Because we believe that our manufacturing process, it will save like more than 100x the water consumption in the process. It will reduce the energy intensity of paper making, but it will also create a better product. But as we all know, we need to be realistic. So packaging business, it's a lot cost-driven business. It's a volume business. There's economies of scale. So we need to start small. So Paptic today, we are focusing on small niche businesses, finding those pockets where we can grow. But for our technology, we see a long-term opportunity which is arising from the fact that we are creating systemic change. We are creating a systemic change for the manufacturing processes. We are trying to be compatible with the global recycling processes, compatible with the supply chains of packaging. So we are not only optimizing our product, we are trying to change the way people use paper-based packaging in the world.
I love what you said in terms of completely reinventing paper, so that it's not it's not this thing as we see it today. It's a completely different process in the way that it's developed. I'm going to come back to the point that you made in terms of commercializing, because I think it's really important in scaling. But first, Hélène, I want to hear from you in terms of, do you think it's scalable? Do you think everybody's going to be wanting to use edible packaging?
I hope so, of course, but yes, I think nowadays people are ready to change. We can see that the mentality has changed, because a few years ago, we started 4 years ago with DoEat. People were like, okay, it's a fun product, but stop. And now the big industry are looking for this kind of solution, and they are speaking with us for replacing all the containers in their industry. So yes, I think it can become mainstream.
So I think what you're lucky is that there's a lot of global focus on plastic and pollution, and organizations, especially those that have got a high CSR objective really want to be able to show that they're making a difference. And so that helps with these sort of industries where you're doing things in the space of making a difference. But back to Tuomas's point, it does come down to commercials. What needs to happen to make this commercially viable? Do you think it's a governmental thing? Like, do we need external policy to support this in the same way you start to charge for plastic in shops? It doesn't need to be much. You put like a little charge and that then changes people's behavior. Or do you think it's just that organizations will get there on time? How do we balance the social need with the real economics of doing business? Tuomas, because you sparked the question, how are you guys doing it?
Well, we started developing the Paptic business plan 5 years ago, and the world was rather different back then compared to today. We see the legislation as an important catalyst for the business, but it cannot be the basis for the business model. You need to build the value you are creating on the fundamentals of your business. But one of our market areas, application areas for the materials, is carrier bags. And in carrier bags, with the EU Plastic Bag Directive, you've seen a lot of changes. So when the bag that used to be free now has a price tag, it actually becomes a product consumers would like to buy or need to buy. And then actually also many other factors come to the question, and we've actually studied a lot the point of what do consumers appreciate when they are actually buying a bag. It's like the reusability, how handy is it for using a second time, because nobody, in practice, we don't want to pay for single-use items. We tend to do that, but if the bag that has the reusability, has the functionality, the better bag, costs like 2 cents more, 5 cents more, it's actually insignificant for the purchase decision. We see that in the carrier bags as a, let's say, market where we can quickly introduce Paptic product. So it's one of our go-to markets as first choice. So there especially we see that the legislation does have a, let's say, catalyzing effect. But in other terms, take like e-commerce as another example, where the legislation is not driving the change that much, although it's restricting the use of plastics, especially in the minds of consumers. But where we are, for example, driving, let's say, intangible value is in the customer experience. So if we can deliver the consumer a better package that has better sustainability, better functionality, and actually pleasing haptics, so the usability, because Paptic is like textile-like. So if we can buy sustainable materials, not only improve, let's say, the green value, but also the quality of actually the services and products delivered in those packages, that actually increase the value and so also compensates for the business model for the price of novel materials. Because we all know that starting with novel materials on the day one, it's difficult to be in price par with the incumbents to commodity materials.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want, people aren't necessarily interested in just it for it being novel. What they're wanting is it's got to actually be able to function and compete against something that they know and understand. And sometimes, for the vast majority of people, just saying you've got something that's bio and eco and better for the environment is not sufficient to transform behavior. Hélène, how are you finding that in terms of what it takes for you guys to get out there and drive behavioral change?
I think it is a challenge for us to distribute our product, because the industrial in the food are looking for something very, very similar of plastic. And like you say, our products are ecologic, biodegradable, but it's not only 100% similar of the plastic. So it's a challenge for us to make them understand that there is some change to make. And for an example that we have actually, we are working with an industrial in food, and they are asking us to give an analysis, food compliance certificate, and this is an analysis that proves that there is no plastic in the food when you use a container in plastic. And it's kind of aberrant to ask us that, because we have an 100% edible packaging, so of course there is no plastic. It's ingredients, it's not material. So it's very, very hard to make understand them, this kind of thing. So it's kind of, it's blocking us, you know.
Because there's an educational piece
Yes,
required.
yes, very
you know,
educational.
society,
Yeah.
other organisations have kind of got, in the same way we first needed to understand that plastic creates a problem, we also need to understand, well, what do we do with these new materials and how do we work with them, and are they going to function and deliver the same experience that we're used to, or perhaps even a better experience than what we're used to? Laurie, how are you finding it? I suppose you see it from a completely different perspective, looking at sort of recycling and non-recyclable materials. And what do you think in terms of what it takes to really get these things embedded? Is it to do with legislation, or is it something else that helps to bring this to attention and help your organizations grow?
Yes, I think I'm very much in line with what Thomas said. I think legislation has to change, has to happen, has to impact. You know, it's great to hear that we're going to ban plastic straws, but I think it's just a symbol. I think we should go a step ahead. And then, yeah, I think now there is room for innovation. There are a lot of companies developing new business model to make a change and the single-use plastic pollution. There are more fundings as well. There are more. In the case of company like Terracycle, we rely on partnerships with fast consumer goods company, and we are very happy to see now that there is a big change in the way they approach plastic waste. We give us a lot of opportunity to do more R&D, to innovate. I also think that education is very important, communication, and the work we do with brands is interesting because who better than brand, can communicate to consumers that surround us every day. So if they put recycling as a main message in their communication, that can make a change. And also just as consumer, as citizen, we need to be very conscious of the power we have every time we make a purchasing decision, every time we buy a product, we buy a packaging, we make a choice for the future. And I think we need to keep that in mind because sometimes we forget, but it's important to also in our consumption go for more sustainable product, more sustainable brands and so on.
So it does come from all of us, myself included, in terms of the purchasing decisions that we're making, because we're only encouraging certain behaviors, or if organizations continue to see that you continue to buy plastics that there's no incentive for them to make any difference. So last question for each of you, and Hélène, I'd like to start with you. At DoEat, what is the big vision in terms of, if we were to look 5-10 years into the future, what impact do you think you're going to be able to have?
Our dream is to replace all packaging, but I think, yes, it's our dream is to replace the plastic everywhere. We try to replace the plastic everywhere, find a solution, and maybe also we hope that the mind are changing, because yes, it's great to have solution, but the mind has to change also, because sometimes people are great with this solution. Okay, it's fun. Okay, it's great. It's good for the planet, but it's only words, and they make no change. So I think what's our dream is to replace the plastic, and also that people change their mind.
To get people on board to say, actually, it'd be much nicer to have something that I can throw in the compost as opposed to throwing into landfill. What about at Terracycle? What is your bigger? I mean, you guys are doing a lot now anyway, but what's the big vision 5-10 years down the line?
So on our recycling business, I think the big goal for Terracycle is it's actually that one day Terracycle recycling business doesn't exist anymore, because the solutions are completely mainstream and they finance themselves. So that's the big dream, is for a company, our purpose is not to exist anymore one day, and this day we'll have achieved our mission. And I think recently we're really looking at developing new business model. We think that to eliminate the idea and the concept of waste, recycling is part of it, but it's not the solution. So looking at more new innovative business model around reusing, and I think that's the big thing we're preparing for next year. So.
That is pretty cool. The big vision is to make ourselves redundant. I've never
Yes.
heard that one before. Tuomas, what about at Paptic? I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but what is the bigger vision 5, 10 years down the line?
Well, right now Paptic is a bit older than 3 years. We are also a bit strange startup company as we are actually building a paper mill, because our technology is a proprietary manufacturing process that's difficult to license out at this point. So we see that there's a big hill that we need to climb, but the vision is also big, because we want to see the million tons of Paptic on the market. We want to see Paptic as the first alternative to plastics in the flexible packaging markets. We want to create Paptic as a new concept, new segment. Imagine like Gore-Tex in packaging. We want to create a brand for sustainable packaging, the material that actually stands out from the crowd. So we have big visions. We are going through the manufacturing route in this business. It's not easy to grow, but luckily we have the good push. The world is turning now our direction.
Fantastic. I wish all three of you the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause to our panelists, Laure, Hélène, and Tuomas. Thank you.